and welcome everyone. My name is Kaylee. I'm the Executive Director at the West Kootenay Regional Arts Council. As the name implies, we are a regional arts council based in the West Kootenays, but through our programs, we serve, whoops, I keep clicking. I need to make sure I can have Zoom over here and my notes over here. Bear with me. Good. Alrighty. So as I was saying, we serve the West Kootenays, but also the East Kootenays and the north of the Columbia Basin, all the way up into the Valemount region. So it's a pretty big area, and this area is the traditional territory of the Snaiks Confederacy, the Ktunaxa, the Secwepemc, the Syilx, and the Lheidli T'enneh nations. In our work to support community cultural development, we acknowledge that we have a role to play in ensuring that all artistic disciplines and cultural practices can thrive, not just those of settler communities. In terms of the programs that we offer, we provide arts grants throughout the region. We amplify the work of local artists through publications like Articulate Magazine and showcase events like the Columbia Basin Trust. And we also offer professional development opportunities like this one. We also have a few more coming up on November 30th. We've had a few sessions, curated specifically by Samante Cruz for the LGBTQ arts community. So if that's relevant to you, do take a look on our website. We're talking about alternative revenue streams for artists, as well as getting your digital toolkit ready to go to market yourself as a creator. So take a look at that. And this whole series would not be possible without the support of the BC Arts Council. So big shout out to them and their Arts Impact Project. I'm sure many of us on this call are writing applications for the next intake for that very program. So thanks to the BC Arts Council. And lastly, thanks to our fantastic presenters. We are so pleased today to have Jessica Wadsworth. She's the Executive Director of the Canadian Alliance of Dance Artists West Chapter. She is also a multidisciplinary arts manager, writer, producer, and documentary filmmaker, which I was unaware of until reading your bio recently. So I'm very excited about all your film projects that are coming up. She's based in Vancouver and has organized and overseen events, tours, and exhibitions all over the world. She's managed multiple companies and organizations, including Kinesis Dance, African Stages Association, Mandala Arts and Culture, New Works Performance Society, and CADA West. Jessica is also a strong advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion in the sector. She chairs the newly formed CIRA Collective, Sector Equity for Anti-Racism in the Arts, and she's a longstanding member of the City of Vancouver Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. While her main professional activities have had a performing arts focus, visual arts, film, and community-based arts have also featured prominently in her career. So if you're joining us from outside of dance or performance, have no fear, you are in very good hands with our presenters today. And we also have Victor Tran joining us, who's the Communications and Outreach Director at the Canadian Alliance of Dance Artists West Chapter as well. He's also a multifaceted street dance artist living on the unceded Coast Salish territories. Arriving from a lineage of South Vietnamese refugees, he is known in the underground scene as B-Boy Savage Rock, which is an awesome name, and as one half of the hustle duo, Savage and Samuel. For over 15 years, Savage's dance practice in breaking and hustle, if you're unaware, hustle is a very cool partner dance. I haven't had the chance to try it yet, but I love watching it. His practice consists of creation, performance, battle, mentorship, and community organizing. Savage is currently a project manager for Breaking BC Foundation and a director of hustle at RS Dance Society. I need to enunciate better. Welcome to you both. I'm so pleased to have been colleagues with you in the dance sector and lovely to collaborate with you in this context. Over to you, and I will spotlight you as you're chatting too.
Nice, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us here today, everyone. I'll jump right into it. Essentially, what we are doing here today is going over some basics and then delving into a little bit about grants. So Victor's going to take over from me once I get over a few basic ideas. These are for the emerging artist, essentially, but they're just really nuts and bolts things, and they'll serve you in your career because one of the biggest things you're going to have to do if you're launching or in the early stages of having an arts career is you're going to have to advocate for yourself and you're going to have to be an entrepreneur. So there's a few things that you can do and make sure that you know and understand to make sure that you can do that for yourself. We have some really basic stuff. So I'm going to actually start by sharing my screen here. to show a resume. I was asked to share this. I did blank out. It is a resume that I received. So the Canadian Alliance of Dance Artists does ask for a person's resume when they apply for membership with us. It's only so that we can get to know you better in a snapshot. And a resume is just that. It is a way for you to give your information in one page to a person so that they can just check you out. There's some fundamentals. This one is pretty good. Sometimes we get resumes that don't have a name on them or contact information on them, or they don't have any dates on them. So I just want to clarify a few things. I've blanked out this person's photo and their name, but they had their name in big block letters at the top, brief description of themselves, and then they've sort of visually laid theirs out. My personal resume is black text on white paper, and it's just a list, and it has the categories from there. This person has subheadings: profile, education, training, and their contact info was down at the bottom of this, so it was on the page. Some people will put their contact info right up at the top under their name. And then it has the subheaders, teaching experience. So this person has the subheaders and then the individual places that they have taught at. And it also says the dates. So start with your most recent stuff first, and then get older in time as you go down your resume. And sometimes people will put in, if you're a performer, they'll put in like who was the project lead. If it's theater, it's usually the director. If it's dance, it's the choreographer. If it's an orchestra, it will be the conductor or the composer of the piece. So that could be something you could add in there. And then they've also put their title in there. So they're the creator and founder of a business. They're a ballet teacher, a teacher here, a principal dance instructor, a dance and music instructor. They list everything in there, and a couple of bullet points about the sort of the key responsibilities that they had in those roles. And then, of course, they've got their education with the years that they did that education there, and a couple of additional points that are worth, mentioning on a resume. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on that. It's just that sometimes we see resumes that are really missing key information, and you'd be surprised, like not having a phone number or an email address on your resume kind of renders your resume useless in a lot of ways. And you might need your resume for grant applications, job applications, projects, sponsorship. There's all kinds of reasons why a resume is a really good thing to have. And then last point about that is you should be updating your resume every time something of note happens in your artistic career. Don't leave it for 4 years without updating it. Update it every time you do something. So you should have a running, ongoing, active resume. And that is all I'm going to actually say about that. I'm going to share some other really quick, brief points so that we can get through the stuff that is a little less exciting. I'm going to just see if I can click my tabs from here. Can you guys see my screen right now? It should say CADA West, and it's got like a login screen on it. Okay,
Yep,
I got a thumbs up emoji from Victor. Good. I wanted to show you our website, CADA West, and I'll also point out some other unions as well. So CADA West, the Canadian Alliance of Dance Artists, is not actually a union. It's an association of artists. So a number of years ago, decades ago, a bunch of dance artists got together and said, look, we need to not unionize, but we need to stand together as a group, and we need to advocate for ourselves. So, and that started in 1999 in BC, but there's a CADA in Ontario that started 10 years before that. So this has been ongoing for dance for decades now, and it's really upped the bar for dance artists. We have fees and rate standards. So these were put together, and they are only updated and modified every few years. They're on our website, cadawest.org. You can just click on fees and rate standards. We just did these. They're fairly new, so they're at the top of our website. We have professional standards. So it's got rates for different elements of dance, choreographers, apprentices, dancers, teachers, etc. It's got definitions of hourly or weekly rates. It's got performance rates as well. We have information about royalties, teaching rates. You can expand and collapse all of these sections on our website. Per diems for touring, rates for administration. Believe it or not, the time that you spend administrating your arts practice should be documented. You might not be able to pay yourself for that throughout your career, but if you're ever on a project where you can, you should have documentation of all of the soft work that goes into administrating your career. And then a little word about documentation and research. Okay, down here at the bottom is a list of CADA East. So that's CADA in Ontario that I was referring to, the Canadian League of Composers, and CARFAC. So that's music, and CARFAC is for visual artists. For theater, there's Canadian Actors Equity. We actually have that listed elsewhere. Let me just go back here to this part. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, this is our resources database. So if you click on resources on our website, you're going to get here. This is a whole bunch of information that's really great. I had opened up this for you, other service organizations. So no matter where you are in the country, you should be able to reach out to a service organization for your art form. And then we have other unions and associations listed here. If you're in film and television, you would be familiar with Union of BC Performers. If you're in film and television in other provinces, they use ACTRA. Those two unions are one and the same. One is a branch of the other one. If you're in theater, Canadian Actors Equity Association. These are either unions or associations that set the bar for the work that you do, because a lot of the time, if you're just out there alone and you're not looking at this stuff, you don't know what is fair to charge for your work, and you could be undercharging yourself. We often find people come to our website and then send us an email and they go, oh my God, I didn't know how much I should be charging for my work. And this is so much better for me to be able to show people that I'm negotiating with, hey, there is a standard for what I do. It's right here. I'm a professional actor, I'm a professional dancer, I'm a professional musician. Here's the rates that I charge for the work that I do. And the people that came before you that set all this stuff up, they fought hard to make these standards what they are. So it is beneficial to everyone if you don't go below the minimums. So I just wanted to show you our website and those pieces of information. And then maybe we'll put all these links in the chat afterwards. Other things that have come up is, people who are running their own businesses have to know this stuff. This is just a regular CRA website, but it gives you the rules on tracking income and expenses. So you should be keeping receipts for things that you pay for your business. And a receipt isn't just like a handwritten squiggle on like dollar store receipt pad. It should have the date, the name of the business, the item that was purchased, the date it was purchased, if I didn't say that before, any applicable taxes, and a total amount on it. Make sure that if you go to a restaurant or to anywhere, that you don't just get the debit tape that comes out of the debit machine for when you've paid by credit card. Make sure you have what's called an itemized receipt. Sometimes you have to ask for that separately. Otherwise, they will just give you the debit ticker tape thing. And that actually doesn't count as a receipt. So it doesn't, the government will not recognize that expense if you only have the debit receipt. Like if you were to get audited by the CRA, they would just throw that expense out, and it could be very significant. So make sure you know that. I'll put this in the chat. So again, expense records. Always get receipts or vouchers when you buy something for your business. That's the government of Canada talking to you. What goes on a receipt? All these things. So just make sure you know that. We'll stick that link in the chat for you, and we'll move on from there. If you are a member of the Canadian Actors Equity as a professional artist, you can get access to training subsidy. I don't know if you know this, but and I don't know how many of you, we haven't introduced anyone here, so I don't know how many of you are dancers. We have a training subsidy program where you submit receipts. And this is the form you click through to get onto this form on our website. You submit the receipts and then we give you money. So, you know, ping me in the chat if you want to know more about that. But it says right there, receipts must include, then it names the things, your name, the date, the address of the business. So we also require you to have a proper receipt. So if you do a workshop in dance or take classes in dance, your teacher or instructor needs to be providing you with those receipts in order for you to take advantage of this program. So it's yet another reason to make sure that you ask for that receipt. I wanted to share another great resource for artists. This one is not specific to dance, so it works really well in a workshop environment. Kaylee would be familiar with these guys. This is a generator based out of Toronto, their artist producer resource.com. It is basically an updated blog of a ton of information. It is an excellent place to go if you have any questions about producing events or running your own arts practice. It's got links to everything: self-producing, being produced, artist life, budgeting, community, contracts, funding, marketing, operations. It's got some excellent stuff in there. And I refer to this website all the time. I'm actually a monthly donor to these guys because I believe in this project so much. And I actually refer my membership at CADA West to this website all the time. I'm like, this is an excellent, they've got a lot of funding and they put this together and it's a really great website. So you just have to make sure that the information that you're getting works for British Columbia. Sometimes it'll be a little bit Ontario centric. So just make sure you keep an eye on what you reference out of there. And then Kaylee also wanted me to touch on something. I'm not a tax accountant, so I want to be really clear that if you are operating an arts practice and you have any questions that are of a CRA, a Canada Revenue Agency nature, you should talk to an accountant. And it's not overly expensive to have a conversation. A lot of them will give you your first phone call for free and you can ask a specific question. I always just tell people, like, if you have a car problem, you call a mechanic. If you have a plumbing problem, you call a plumber. You have a tax question, call an accountant. These people know what they're talking about. This will be when we get into talking about grants, which some of you will determine that you want to apply for grants and you want to have funding for art projects. Some of you will just decide, no, I'm an independent artist. I just want to like earn my bread and live like that. I don't want to apply for these grants. But this is Canada Council for the Arts website, and it's just income taxes in your grant. And it just explains to you a little bit about when you receive grant money, it is something that you have to claim as income. So you do get taxed on grant money. And you've got to know how to claim expenses against your grant money so that the government can see that this is, that's not just money that goes into your pocket, it's money specifically for you to deliver a project, which is what the agreement is that you have with a funder is. They're going to give you money so that you can do the project you said you would do. So I'll stick that in the chat as well. You want to save all of those receipts and all those expenses. If you talk to an accountant, it's better than talking to me, but basically you're trying to save all of the receipts related to your art project. Anyone that you paid, so if you paid another artist out of your grant, they need to provide you with an invoice. And that is proof, that invoice is proof that you paid money to that person. They gave you an invoice that said, hey, I'm Jessica. I did this for you, whatever it is. I danced in your piece. I performed in your show. I wrote you some music, whatever it is. And I charged X amount of dollars and you paid it to me. So the invoice that a person gives you is something that you're going to use to claim against that grant income that you made. I think also Kaylee wanted me to make sure that you understood what an invoice was. If you don't know what an invoice is, it is a note. Basically, it can be digital, or we used to do them on paper in the olden days. You're sending this digital or paper note to someone and you're saying, to that person, so to their name and their address, you get their name and their address, the name of their business or whatever, you put it at the top, from, and that's where you put your name and address and contact information, and then the date, and it says services provided and the amount, and it says like payable by e-transfer or payable by check, however you want to do that. It is a record of the labor that was performed. So sometimes we think of our arts practices as being like off the books. No, it's very much something that you want to have documentation for. So the invoice is documentation that you performed a task and you were paid for it. On the other side, if you're the person who's paying that out, this is your proof that your money was spent on a business expense. So just super important that you have record of all labor expenses as well as all the other expenses that go on with making art. It could be renting a hall or renting a studio or purchasing costumes, purchasing makeup, doesn't matter what it is. You have to keep all of those receipts and those will go to your accountant. So I really am pushing the idea that you should have an accountant. We also on our website, if I go back to our website, oops, I should go back to the resources section. We have, pretty sure, yeah, stage 1 accounting. These guys are like known and growing as being specializing in the entertainment industry. So you could contact them and they could get you started, or you just use someone locally in your region. The key thing is you want them to understand what an artist's life is like what you are spending your money on and how it is legitimately supporting your arts practice. It's helpful if they also know about things like grants and stuff like that too. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to show you, which is like, it's a tough one for me to show because it's not quite ready yet, but CADA West also provides contract templates. So if you're on our website, you can also find a template for a dance contract. It's super important to have contracts when you work with people. I've learned this the hard way. I'm sure a lot of people have learned this the hard way. A lot of the time in the arts, we're working with our friends or friends of friends. So the big F word here is friend, and it can be a little bit awkward. But jotting some stuff down on paper is not a bad way to do it. A contract can be really simple. It can be one page, or it can be multi-pages that if you're getting into something that carries any sort of financial risk, you might want to clarify who's on the hook for what. And a contract can be there to clarify if something goes awry, because sometimes things don't go as planned and then you're kind of, things aren't working out. So you got to refer to the contract to see, okay, well, what did we say we would do? How would we handle a bad situation when it happens? Oh, it's not letting me log in, so I'm going to continue as a guest. Anyway, I'll put this in the chat. CADA West has been secretly and quietly developing a digital contract generator in the background. So we do have a PDF document for a contract template if you want it. But we are also building this contract or digital contract generator in the background. And basically, it will spit out a contract after you feed it some information. So it asks you, it is actually designed for an artist to create their own contracts. Normally an engager who's doing the hiring creates the contracts and presents those to the person they're hiring. Because we're trying to empower artists, we've designed it from the perspective of someone who is maybe the person that's being hired, you as the artist, but you are providing a contract because you want one. And sometimes your engager is not giving you one. So you can turn around and say, I whipped this together. Take a look at this. Why don't we negotiate a contract? So it's the hiring party is the engager. You put in their information. And then as you scroll down, the engagee, this is how we think of it, is you as the artist. So you would put your information. If you run a company, you might be the person who is the engager. The engager at the top here, that's the person who is offering the job. Okay, so that's the difference between those two terms. You can put a logo on this, it's not important. I'm going to keep this really, really simple for right now, because this contract generator is not ready yet to be launched. It does work, like it will spit out a contract. If I give you the link, you can make a contract, but it's got all kinds of bugs in it. And it's really designed for dance right now. So it's not multidisciplinary. You can make a teaching contract right now and a performing contract. Eventually, we're going to have a much more robust digital contract generator that will get into community arts projects. If you're a presenter, like if you're running a festival, collaborating will be between, parties that are both co-producing or co-collaborating on something. So it's not hierarchical. It's like two people working together. And so you'll select one of these templates, you'll go into that, and it'll ask you like, who is the engager? So it could be a company, could be a choreographer, could be any one of these different roles that we've got here. Then it says, who is the engagee? So if you're a dancer, you would click here, making that contract. There's a number of different roles, got musician, performer, interpreter, which is often used in contemporary forms, a rehearsal director, videographer, all these different categories. And then it'll be like, okay, so what is the engagement? So is it research? Is it production? Is it a tour? Like all these different contract things. And you can put a description of the project at the bottom. Then we get into roles, responsibilities, and working conditions. This section needs a little bit of work, but sometimes like dancers always want to have Marley floor in a properly ventilated and heated or temperature controlled space. That's the most ideal condition for dancing. But some halls and rehearsal studios don't have that. So you might have a wood floor or something with concrete underneath, which is harder on the body. It's fine, but you should put that in the contract so people know that's what the job is. We're using this place and it's like this. So people should have a conversation with that beforehand. Sorry, I gotta have a drink of water. I'll get one in a sec. This is just where you put down the dates of what's going to happen in the contract, and you can add additional rows. So it'll say a date, start time, end time, location, activity. Could be a rehearsal, could be a performance. There's, you can fill out a schedule on here if you want, or you can leave this blank and just attach a schedule to the contract so that you're actually negotiating when the work is going to occur. This stuff gets into payment. So reimbursement for expenses, accommodations, transportation, per diems, hourly rates, flat rates, per diem structure, all that kind of stuff in here. And then we get into some royalties and copyright. So who owns the work? Who has credits? What are those credits? If you're involved in the type of art form where you have to acknowledge your ancestry or your lineage, you can put that here. Royalties, again, you can refer back to our website. So if the work were ever to get picked up or remounted later on at another time, you could get royalty fees on top of that. Uses of photography. So where is my image allowed to be used, or where do we expect my image to be used? So you might have marketing materials where you're on the cover of it. You want to have a conversation about how and where the person is going to use your image beforehand, because you don't want it to be misused. Years down the road, your image could be misused. So you want to be able to refer back to the contract and have a conversation about the uses of your image in marketing materials. Now it says you're all done. So you would click, you could download a PDF or download Word. I'll give you guys this link. I recommend you download a Word document if you play with this, because then you can just edit it and pull stuff out. So I'll tell you right now, it's not, it's still very much in beta mode, but it might be a starting point for you if you've never used contracts before. So that's it. I wanted to whip through all of the stuff that was super, fundamental basics, like meat and potatoes, arts, career stuff. And then I wanted to hand it over to Victor so that I could get a sip of water, but also because Victor's going to talk about something that's a lot more interesting than what I just did. So Victor, are you cool? You're ready right now? Okay, you go for it.
Yeah, sure.
I've actually, before you jump in, Victor, I've got one question that actually came through the registration for this event. and I didn't say at the beginning, if anyone has a question, Victor and Jessica have let me know that they welcome anyone jumping in and just popping in with a question at any time, or you can drop it in the chat and they can touch on that when they're taking a break and a sip of water, or just jump in at any time, and we will respond as best we can. But a question that came in specifically around contracts, so I thought I should toss it in now, is what if you forget to add something, or say you hadn't looked at a minimum schedule and you realize, oh, I actually should be charging something different. Can you renegotiate a contract? Could you come back to your collaborator or to your presenter and say, actually, we need to amend these terms?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I always think of it as leverage. Like, what is the point at which? So your strongest point of negotiation is before your contract is signed, because that's when you get a chance to put everything on the table. However, it does happen. Sometimes you've already signed the contract and then new information comes to light. So a contract should always say, and ours also does say this if you use that contract generator, it will say any changes to this contract should be agreed to in writing. So you make an amendment to a contract, and so your negotiating position is a little bit weaker after you've signed. But here's the thing: if you haven't started working yet, and you've already signed contracts, then you find out, hey, I should be actually charging a little bit more for this work. And you go back to that person and you say, look, I've underestimated how much work this is, or what I should be valued at for this work. I realize my worth, you could say. And they'll say, oh, but we've already signed the contract. You can say, look, I'm not comfortable proceeding. Now that's a tough one, because it is a negotiating tool, but you could back out, right? So it gives you a tiny little bit of leverage. I'm not saying you start threatening people and you damage relationships in that case. Sometimes you just have to suck it up, right? Because you already signed the contract. But sometimes you can turn around and say, look, I don't think I'm gonna, like, I haven't invested a lot yet, in the project. I can walk away still. Or would you like to renegotiate and come back to the table and talk about this? And it honestly, this whole business, everything to do with being an artist, is advocating for yourself, but you're building relationships with people. You're building long-term working relationships. I always say to people, like, I live in Vancouver, third largest city in Canada. It's still only a tiny little place. I can't go around burning bridges here. I still have to work here and live here. This is where I raised my kids. Like, I have to function like an adult, and I have to function like a reasonable person, because this is my home and I want to have an arts career. So, your behavior is valuable, like in any one of these cases, but it's not crazy to find out something or find out the size or the scope of the project after signing the contracts and going, you know what, this isn't going to work for me, right? Can we come back to the table because this, and this? So yeah, you can renegotiate a rate, but you should have a conversation, renegotiate, and then put that in writing as well. And it's an addendum to a contract.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. I just thought that was a really great question, so I appreciate you touching on that. Over to you, Victor, and I'm going to spotlight you as well for everyone.
Sweet. Thanks. Just checking that everyone can hear and see me. Just let me know if you can't. Thanks, Jessica, for the basic rundown and all those really important professional tools. So yeah, my name is Victor, and the Communications and Outreach Director at CADA West. I'm also a street dance artist. And, I'm going to share with you a little story and experience that is twofold. A, to show you that there's a potential opportunity for emerging artists, and B, how I incorporated and use those tools that Jessica just talked about to essentially land a successful grant, but also finish with a successful project. One that was very generative in my arts practice, but also in my relationships with the people that I worked with. So I'm basically my portion is going to take about 10 minutes, maybe 15. Do feel free to chime in if you have a question and whatnot. I'm just going to share my screen now. Is this the right one? Yes. Great. Cool. So my story is with an early career project that was funded through the BC Arts Council, and it was the Early Career Development Grant. So just before I talk about my project, I just want to talk about the grant itself. There's two main streams. There's one for individuals and one for groups, organizations, and collectives. For individuals, you can apply for a residency, which will give you an opportunity to, practice to practice with an organization. And I think a lot of folks are familiar with residencies. And then there's a mentorship model, which you can work with an established practitioner, and you can, through this mentorship, you can work within your field, art form, or discipline. For organizations and collectives, you can get an internship. You can apply for an internship, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's a paid internship with an organization, and then or you can go and apply for a cohort, which is a group of early career practitioners in a paid professional development opportunity.
Hey, Victor, before you move on, we just had a question about defining what an art residency is. I think it's very common in performance, but I'm seeing more of them popping up in the visual arts and other disciplines. But if you could just touch on what exactly that entails, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks. I just saw the question, and I thank you for raising that question. A residency is essentially, for example, an organization, an arts collective. They will give an artist an opportunity to come to their space or a space, and they will support your practice or your project by giving you X amount of studio time, as well as other resources such as like lighting or sound equipment, things like that, so that you can have time to really dedicate on your practice, your project, or your performance and whatnot. So it's a way for organizations to support artists, but also kind of start to establish maybe a relationship where they might present you in the future, or they're just interested in supporting your work. And those residencies are awesome because they are an example of support that you might have. And if you can show that when you propose for funding, it makes your proposal a lot more successful because it shows that you already have support from elsewhere, and that you're not just relying on one source of funding. Yeah, thanks. Whoops. I'm going to jump into the website actually really quick, because I think it's important to go over that. I'm just going to share. Oh. Okay, cool. This is the website for the early career development on the BC Arts Council website. Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly go through the headings. You can, we just talked about it, the description of this program. But down below, you can start to see who can apply, whether this is a good fit for you, whether or not you're eligible. And then it shows you how to apply, which is really important as well. Down here is the program guidelines. And these I use extensively because they served as templates pretty much, and it just helped me, be on track and make sure I got the grant done, because sometimes it always is a lot of work. So you want to manage your time, and you you chew through the work at a reasonable pace. And then this is probably the most important part here is actually the contacts. Always contact your program advisor to say hello and say, I am curious. When I applied, I basically said, I don't know what I'm doing. And they said, that's fine. And they asked me in a very friendly way, and they were really warm, just some questions about what I want to do, about my practice. And then they just made sure that, okay, you are eligible, or you need this to be eligible, which saved me a lot of time. So always contact them. And if you have questions, they are there for you. Okay, and so that's the Early Career Development Project from the BC Arts Council. And it's not just for dance, right? You can see the disciplines. It's for visual artists, literary. So I do highly recommend you to check it out if you are an early career practitioner. Yeah. I'm gonna go back to my presentation. Give me a second here.
This is awesome, Victor. Just so everyone else is aware, when I was chatting with Jessica and Victor about what exactly needed to be covered, the conversation started with, well, we've had a lot of questions around contracts and invoices, and that's what we heard a lot of expressions about trying to demystify. But as we were talking about that, we realized, oh, this would be super helpful for emerging artists just starting their career, and this would be helpful, and this would be helpful. So thank you, Victor, for sharing your experience with that specific grant.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, and I'm really happy to share about this. It's made a huge impact on my life, so any opportunity for me to share about this this work, I'm happy to. So just moving on to my project. So as you know, I work at CADA, but I'm also practicing artist. So I'm wearing my artist hat right now, talk about my art, but I'm going to also put on my CADA West hat to talk about how the tools that I've actually learned being at CADA West has empowered my practice to make just maximize my success in my project. This project is called Grand Saut, French for giant leap, and this was a project that was funded by the Early Career Development. I chose the mentorship model, and this project was to transpose street dance experience onto the stage using new and innovative approaches to choreography. And it was a year-long project. I collaborated with my life and dance partner, and I chose my mentor based off of existing working relationships in multiple capacities. My mentor was Deanna Peters, who was the former communications director at CADA West, and Deanna had actually succeeded me into my role now. This kind of mentorship, feeds into my arts practice as well. And I guess my point here is that when we're talking about contracts, or what I kind of see them as agreements or living agreements, I try to make them always as living agreements. They support those relationships. It's those agreements are for both parties to act on goodwill, and for both both parties to always be on the same page and to be clear about how you will address issues, how you can resolve them. And even though for the grant proposals, you won't necessarily need contracts, this is for you to actually empower all of your work as an artist. When you're working with others, you want to empower your relationships, and agreements are like the way to go. And once you've started doing them, and using the digital contract generator, which I actually use, and I just parsed out the essentials and then adapted it to my my specific situation, it really just like made everything so clear, and it just, we walk away from the project feeling that, you know, we understood what was expected of us and that everyone met each other's expectations. And just to say, like, my contracts are like pretty casual. Like, I try not to use too much of like the legal jargon. I just try to be very plain in the language, and I think that's totally fine. Okay, so this project had 3 phases. The first phase was to commission our mentor Deanna to set choreography on myself, my partner. So we were learning by doing and amassing experience in our body, and then we shared it through a private, like, in-person sharing, and also over Zoom. The second phase was a solo, where I was the main author. So I was the choreographer, and I had just outside support from my partner Samuel and Deanna. So there was that kind of a relationship that we were exploring. And then the third model was doing a duet choreography where myself and Samuel were the choreographers, and we had a mentor, an outside eye, Deanna. So these 3 phases kind of helped me learn about the different roles, and as well as the work involved in creation. You know, this project was great because in a mentorship model, like, yes, you learn about the for me, it was about dance. So we were learning about choreography techniques, structure, improvisation, how to self-present, how to self-produce, the value of indie work. And then there's like the back-end stuff, project management, how to seek support, credits, compensation, fair compensation, authorship, you know, and just so much more. But these are all the things that I feel would make all of your artwork and your practice so much stronger. Cool. So that was a project. You know, now putting on my CADA West hat and talking about the tools that, you know, more about the tools that I used in this project. You're always gonna have to deal with the budget, and that's like pretty much the first thing you want to kind of the main item you want to, you know, check off the list. And so this is just a snapshot from my own grant proposal from the BC Arts Council, so that, you know, people could just see what they're going to be, you know, dealing with. And it's fairly standard, and you'll experience this as you apply for more funding. But I want to get to this page, which is the fees paid to mentors and other professional fees. So as you can see, there's some numbers here, right? These are the fees that I've outlined. And how did I determine these fees? Well, I just go to the cadawest.org website. I go to the fees and rate standards. I look at the minimum, and then I talk to the people that I'm collaborating with, asking, hey, what is your standard? Because CADA West, we provide minimums, but that's minimum. That's not taking into consideration the expertise, the type of work involved, the how extensive it is. So then you start to negotiate, then you talk, and this is, for me, all about building that relationship. As Jessica had mentioned, if you can come out with a stronger relationship, that's a huge success. That's a huge win. So, you know, just to say, use our website. And if you need a point in direction for other fees and rates, you know, our website is a good resource, or you can go to artist producer resource. We will be providing those links. And then in my proposal, you'll notice here at the bottom, it says, no, rates have been determined by using the standard fees and rates at CADA West. So you want to actually, if you're applying for grants, you want to rationalize also why you chose your fees and rates. You want to show that you're proud to be compensating above industry standards. because that's how they know that you are, upholding professional standards and that you're advocating for professional standards within the arts. And down here it says this was old, so I said I had to go higher because the standards were a little bit outdated, but it's updated now. So I'll also mention that for sometimes you'll come across the need for special fees or rates for certain roles that you just have no idea. Like, for example, if you had to hire a technical director or like a videographer and you have no idea, my tip is just to go and ask. Just ask someone in the industry or ask someone who knows someone in the industry. Try to get a sense of what the average is, right? And then make a rationale in your proposal. Yeah. So I talked about fees and rates. I touched on contracts, and how those are very important. So in this proposal, I didn't submit my contracts, but I had contracts for everyone involved. Even my life partner, the person that I live with, he had a contract because it's just good practice. It helped everyone understand the project even more. CVs in these grants, you're going to need to provide CVs, right? And you don't want to you want to be time efficient. So you don't want to update your 4-year-old CV, as Jessica was saying. You want to be time efficient, so you can just pop it in and have it ready. So yeah, I keep them updated. And then invoicing and paying out on time. Once you get familiar with invoicing, it's very, very easy. You could adapt it to whoever you're working with, and it's very quick to just pay out folks on time. And then if folks aren't familiar with that, it's easy for you to send a template for them so that you're sharing that resource. Yeah, and that's it. That's for me and my section. I hope that was helpful.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Victor. That was really fantastic. Just what a great project too. I love, anything that embeds mentorship in a way that pays the mentor and the mentee. Like, that's awesome. Also wanted to flag how nicely you had subsistence rights written in there. That's a question we get a lot from grantees to the Columbia Kootenai Cultural Alliance is, should I be adding in subsistence rights to this project? And the answer we always give is yes, please pay yourself. That is actually what our steering committee and adjudication committee is looking for. They want to be giving money out to projects and artists who are paying themselves and paying artists to do that work. So awesome. That was a fantastic example. We can see, well, if you want to jump on and ask a question, I'll just open that space up. No pressure. We will be sharing all of these resources. We will share the recording on the West Kootenai Regional Arts Council website. A good opportunity to plug the West Kootenai Regional Arts Council website as well for some of the other presentations. We had a session last week specifically about pricing your work, and we spoke to some of those folks that Jessica mentioned, CARFAC BC, Equity, the League of Composers. We had them talking about their fee schedules as well. So if you're in those disciplines, it would be great to take a look at that recording. And a plug for the CKCA grants coming up. Those open in January, and we'll have workshops specific to those grants. Yeah, Jessica.
I was just going to say, because we talked about it briefly when we were prepping for today. What were the max amounts for the 2 different grants that you had? And I wanted to talk about leveraging for applying to other grants.
Right. Yes, we did talk about that. So we actually have a few different programs. We've got arts funding to communities. So if you've never written a grant before and you're a really early career artist, or you're just wanting to do a small community-based project, those are great grants to apply for. That's a max of $2,500. And that assessment actually happens at a local level first with each of the local arts councils within the Columbia Basin. Then we also have mentoring and masterclass masterclass grants. Those go up to a maximum of $4,000. Touring is a maximum of 5,000. And then we have major projects at 10,000. And if you're in a nonprofit organization, we also have an Arts Evolution grant for larger projects up to a maximum of 15,000. Yeah, and the conversation Jessica and I had was around that major project, because we do need to see that you're anticipating some other revenue when you apply for a major project grant. So that concept of leveraging one avenue of support in order to apply for another grant, that's exactly what Jessica's going to touch on right now.
Yeah, like, so the concept of leveraging is being able, so when you do a budget for a grant, quite often they'll ask for you to determine, so a budget is essentially all the expenses, you'll have your expenses listed, and then all the revenue you're expecting to make. And so let's say you list out expenses and those expenses total exactly $10,000. So you have $10,000 in expenses for your project, right? Your revenue may just be you asking for $10,000 from, BC Arts Council or something like that, or Kootenai Arts Council or whatever it is. But sometimes if you really want to convince the jury to jump on board to this amazing opportunity, this cool project, you're listing all your revenue sources and you're stating which revenue sources are confirmed and which are unconfirmed. So the grant you're applying to will be unconfirmed because you haven't submitted, you're just putting in the application. But if you already have confirmed funding, that's leverage. A jury will look at that and they'll say, okay, Kootenai Arts Council has already committed $2,500 to this project, and the rest of the money could come from us, but they've already got some money on the table. So they've already proven to one jury to support the project. Now this makes the project more viable. So the more confirmed funding that you have, the more leverage you have. A jury, when they're deciding who's going to get funding, looks at that and goes, oh, you know what? These guys have been really plugging away at this project, and it looks like they've already convinced some people to invest in this. Let's give the money to them. So leverage is a really good idea. The more sources of funding that you can confirm as you go, the better. And when we do specifically grant writing workshops for our members, we talk about project funding cycles, because you're going to have deadlines for grants over weeks or months or whatever it is. And then each grant is going to take, there's going to be a lag time before you know what the result of that grant application is. So you always plan your projects with this in mind. So sometimes you'll have already heard back about a grant before you're going to hear back, before you're going to put in the application for the other one. So this means when you write grants for projects, you're planning a huge lead time in there before you even start your project, because you're kind of trying to toss out the ball a bunch of times before you start your project to see what money you can get before you have to start. Because the money that you earn off a grant project by selling tickets or, whatever money you might be able to earn off of a tour or whatever it is, that's a risk. You don't know how many tickets you sell until you sell them, right? So the more money you can get in advance before you start your project, the better. It's less of a financial risk for you to take that project on. So things like planning your project cycles to account for grants and using one grant's confirmed funding as leverage for the next application is part of the skill that you build, when you start writing grants for your art projects. Kind of just winged that. Is there anything I left out in regard to that?
Just another note on that, Jessica. Sometimes we get questions too at the CKCA about having received a grant previously and if they are less likely to get a grant in future because they've already gotten a grant from that program. The answer is quite the opposite, actually, because it's really helpful for our steering committee to see that you have a history of completing projects successfully. Right? We want to continue supporting artists who are actually going to complete what they say they're going to complete. So absolutely never a problem to to try again for that same program. I mean, unless you're explicitly not allowed to apply for that same program twice, there are programs like that out there. But as a general rule, it's it's not a mark against you to have already received funds from the grantor you're applying to. We're really veering off into grant land, but thanks for all of that additional content, Jessica and Victor. I do think that those conversations are really helpful to be having at the same time as touching on the paperwork stuff. And actually, I had a question about invoices. I don't know if anyone else has a question. I think those are links that you're popping in the chat. Awesome. That's Jessica in the chat. If no one else has a question, I do have one, and that's based on my own experience of getting a lot of invoices simply in the body of an email. And I feel like it's not great. So I wondered if you wanted to touch on that a little bit. You mentioned what needs to be in an invoice. And generally when I'm getting in the body of an email, I have to fill in a lot of extra information. And my bookkeeper finds that challenging. So I don't know if you want to chat about the forms, the form and medium of some of these contracts and invoices as well, and if there's any specifics you'd recommend.
Well, the nice thing about having templates already set up is that if you have your own invoice template and it already has the basics like your name, address, maybe your business name or whatever, and it's got spots for the services and the total at the bottom, and the e-transfer instructions are already on it. When you go to invoice someone, it takes 2 minutes to complete an invoice. Like, it is not a difficult process. So I would recommend that people have an invoice template that they use for invoicing, and every Word or Apple Pages program have templates for these kinds of things. It's a lot less annoying for the person that has to pay invoices if you send yours as a separate document. Some people have it they have their own bookkeeping software that can invoice out, and then the person just has to click on a link. Those kinds of things are also very useful if you don't want to send it in a PDF. But then, if you have a template, it's really quick and it's already got most of the information. You're just filling in the specifics for that invoice or that project or whatever it is. I would recommend that. Yeah.
Templates are great. We love templates.
Yes.
Well, if there's no more questions or comments from anyone, I think people are running off into other meetings and things, but I want to thank you both so much. And thanks to you, Victor, for your wonderful framing of invoices and contracts as a way to support strengthening relationships. I think a lot of people are scared to have that conversation for the opposite reasons, and concerned that will come across as untrustworthy or something like that. So I really appreciate you framing those as a scaffolding for a productive collaboration and artistic partnership. So thanks to you both for sharing your expertise. Thanks for everyone for coming out, and we'll see you around soon. Stay in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. Bye, everyone.
Bye.